operational historical narrative in order to control the people you conquer with the least amount of resistance from the conquered people.
And
So
don't
this
they
is,
say, yeah, that whoever is victorious gets to write the story,
yeah, the victors write the history.
write the history. Yeah.
Right. So now the way that they keep us from rebelling about their presence on the land is to disassociate us from the land. So the Oxford, no, Notre Dame, where the academic slave narrative was hatched at, gave them a operational manual for disassociating a group of people from the land by telling them they came from somewhere else that has nothing to do with them, and you find a similarity between the two people to convince them otherwise. So they use skin color and hair texture.
Right. 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 So yeah. And again, they also put everything in an Eastern context when I've always had this burning, question about where do I fit into this? Where do we, or not just me, but where do the people in America, at America, where do we fit into the narrative? So everything, the way they rewrote their revisionist, theory, where they do things, they put everything in an Eastern context. It happened over there, and there's no real, as they try to figure out how they was going to connect us to how we got over here. But the one thing I was telling somebody the other day in terms of where we come from, I said anybody else who supposedly commits a crime, if you will, punishable by deportation in America gets shipped back to the country of origin, except for us, unless you came in here, from Africa in the recent times with a visa or something. I'm talking about the majority of people who look like us don't we get sent right straight to jail, which is part of the prison industrial complex. And nobody, if that's the case, we should be deported. But you can't deport us because we're already on our homeland. That's one that in and of itself needs to be brought up as why is that to them? We know why, but we need to let them know that we know why. That
No,
they don't want us.
that's part of our war, domestic warfare, that 99% of the general population was totally unoblivious, been fighting their whole life right in front of them without their knowledge.
Right.
Right. The government already declared that we was the enemy, the people of the land. They had bounties on us for our scalps. And how do you know it's them? Because of the woolly hair. But then they turned around and tell us that the people they brought over here, Mongolians they brought over here and sicked on us, right? They telling us they was the Indians doing the scalping, right? But it was really the settlers brought them people with them as servants.
Mhm.
And this is why they have been privy to a lot of our cultural norms, because somebody had to maintain the culture when they ostracized us on our own land. Right? So they discover during the wars the character of us as the people of the land. And many of the ones that they brought over here from Mongolian wars with the Huns, the Vedics, and the Khans. That's who all of the Ottoman Empire, the early Roman Empire. This is who they was fighting, and this is who they made slave villages out of. And this is where they would go and take their children and do whatever they wanted to do with them, because they was not looked at as human. They was called goyim, meaning
They
chattel, as in the herds of the human animals. Right? So they didn't have any regard for anybody that was not from their bloodline stock of Enlilites.
Mhm.
Right? Then they eat us, literally. Going back to the blood banks and the vampires sucking the blood. We wore wolf pelts in war as a camouflage that we used to use to hunt. You had people from the old Mississippians that roamed the plains they wore bison pelts, and this is why the American government said for every time they kill a bison, they kill one of us, because they thought that the bison turned into us at night and attacked them. But
Is
we
that
was
where like
walking
the
them.
Skinwalker thing comes from? Skinwalker?
That's yes, that's where it's come from.
Explain it. Okay.
So they telling them that when they take the pelts off, we look like kinfolk. This is where the werewolf term lichen come from. They look like kin, but they not.
Right.
They wear wolves. The whole vampire wars with the werewolves, as they told you in that movie Twilight, was against the natives of the land and the colonizers that looked the same, which showed itself as the George Washington Challenge. And everybody else was supposed to ostracize both sides so that they could stay out of it. So this is where you use your doctrine of racism. That's called Protocols of Zion. You apply that method along with torture tactics and false history. And now the people don't know who to trust
That's true.
because they don't know how to recognize the sardines in the can as different fish. They think we all the same fish.
Absolutely. And that is interesting though, when people think that one kind of fish is just a whole bunch of little fish crammed together and pickled up and whatever, mustarded up or whatever you do to them, but they're not all of the same. And
There
that's
is
a
there is no real
it's not
small
even
tame.
called that.
Yeah,
It's not a fish
it's
finger.
named after a place over in Sardinia, is what it's named after,
It literally
and
says
that's
that.
where they practice taking the little fish and pickling them and making them into, uh, you know, stored stock.
Right, right.
Right. This is same thing with anchovies. It all come from over there. That's Italian.
But isn't it true that the sardines, though they call them sardines, there's a whole bunch of different fish, and they're not like us. They call us black, Negro colored, lump us all together, but that's not the truth. That's not factual. But that's the label that's been put on them. The label that's been put on our people.
Yep.
Very,
So
very similar.
they put us all in prison together and just say prisoner.
Prisoners, right? Inmates. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But everybody in there, some people,
Are
I didn't been
innocent.
in. Look, a whole lot of people innocent. Some people got overkill on the sentencing, and some people deserve to be there. They should not be in the roaming around free in the world. I've been in there with them. I done looked in the eyes of some very, very, very terrifying individuals. No soul whatsoever.
Mm.
They have no remorse or no misgivings. They just as much give you a hug as cut your throat. But you just can't keep people trapped in a cage. That's not normal human behavior. It's just they start ruining them as children on purpose so that when they become adults, they can't function in the society. Most of them come from horrible backgrounds. And a lot of them told me, and I can't unhear that stuff. I was like, man, why you have to tell me that? Now I got to be haunted by the same thing that haunts you. To think that the one human would do that to a child. Now I got to live with it just like you do. I didn't want to hear that. Now I can't unhear it. I can't unknow what you told me. I done had cellmates that can't sleep at night because they get tormented in their dreams.
Mm.
Tormented from the dirt they did.
From what they did, yeah. Yeah, I can
Yeah,
imagine.
we did so much dirt. I had one bunkie. He wouldn't even. He was in there for attempted murder, but he had beat to all of the murder cases that they had arrested him for. He had like 17 murders,
Wow.
and he had out date.
Does that mean
And
he
I,
was here at the time when he was going to get released?
yeah, I had more time than him. He had something like 8 years. I had 18. But when after he was in the room with me for about a week, I said, man, they don't need to let you back out on the street. You horrible. There's a whole lot of them in there worse than him. You know, the people that care about their loved ones in there, you should see about them. Because the ones that don't get seen about, the staff doing bad, worse than the inmates. If you know how to take care of yourself, you make alliances and you protect it among the peer group, the inmates. But if you don't have people checking on you, you fool for the officer because you have nobody to tell outside that care about you.
So you have these vicious men and women who are supposed to be peacekeepers who actually have their play out their darkness on the inmates in there because they can, because they have a
Yeah.
position of
Well,
authority.
the slogan is power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
the guards is like gangbangers. And they got in most of the places they got special forces in there. We don't know this. The people out here don't know this. They some of them they call them the goon squad, the head busters, the 6'1s, right? Because everybody got to be over 6'1s. They call them cap splitters, the wrecking crew. Depending on where you at, they got a different name from them all over the country, but it's the same thing. Their only mission is to come in and wreak pain on the inmates by slapping them upside the head with axe handles and billy clubs, spraying them with gas. We don't know that stuff. Regular people don't know the stuff that go on to the inmates in there, as they all prisoners of war in the first place because all of the judges is here illegally. The
Mm-hmm.
police is a foreign occupying military force. The sheriff is supposed to be arresting their ass. But the last time the sheriffs tried to arrest the police department, it was such a public disaster that they had to stop the practice because the police is a slave catching force dispatched out of London, England. This is why the police that's discovering this now is given the opportunity to resign before they declare martial law and clamp down on the. When they told you that the military was given permission to use deadly force in support of the local law enforcement, that's because the National Guard has been sheep dipping special forces agents out of different branches of the military to support them because some of these billionaires and millionaires have private armies. And when you go get them, you need an army. You need a Navy SEAL team. You need an Army Ranger force. The National Guard, from their standard operating procedures, is not prepared for special forces combat. So they had to put the bill in front of them in order to make it a law, in order for the other branches of the military that's been sheep dipped by the National Guard to be an operational force in backing up the National Guard and rounding up all of the dirty players.
Dirty players. Let's go back to pre, like, well, 2020 or in that period of time when they were talking, things used to drop all the time with letters. The 17th letter of the alphabet used to always, remember, that was coming out, and they were giving all of this info out, and intel, I guess they were calling it, with regards to who was getting exposed and who was getting processed and who was getting sent to, you know, places, that were designed to house criminals of their type. Was that just mere propaganda, or
Okay,
did
they just put a bill before Congress. It's a continuity in the absence of 100 and more senators and congressmen. They obviously know that it's going to be at least short 100 senators and congressmen when the revelation comes out about the tribunal. So they have to cover the process of government ahead of the disclosure to the people.
Mhm. so
Right.
so the government, but the current administration. I mean, or the current Congress did this because they know amongst them own their own selves that some of them are going down, is what you're saying, and so they
No,
felt like a duty.
no,
No,
no.
okay.
So okay, so let me tell you, they was running a psychological operations through the political arena using the presidential office as the focal point of a psychological operation so that most of the people will never figure out that there's an active hot war taking place underground all over the earth.
So we're talking
So,
about the tunnels and stuff,
right.
or
So they've been special forces teams in an alliance around the world to go into underground tunnels and get the people that's been stealing children.
okay.
They've been feeding them to what's called archons. Archons are reptilian humanoid creatures that live underground. They do not come above ground because they were seen too much in what they call the dark ages.
Hmm.
They had tunnels that took them from Buckingham Palace in London, took them to the Vatican in Italy, that took them to the Swiss Alps. In Switzerland was the largest underground community of those beings. They've been since cleared out because now they're doing tours of the underground tunnels in Switzerland as the most expansive underground tunnel network of any country. It's the description that they're using to get people to come and look. But it was people living there for hundreds of years before they cleared them out.
Hmm.
What they did with them, I don't know.
Now, isn't Switzerland where the folks that look like us but are not like us that have been in charge for many years were held up or operating from?
Switzerland, yes. That was the hive headquarters of those beings. That's their hive headquarters. They have sub hives around the world. Normally they live in gated communities, but they're able to walk among us because they look like us. And then
Now,
they be telling us kill Whitey and all the time he Whitey.
hmm.
That's to keep us always fighting with each other so we can't never overthrow the real enemy.
Well, I heard that the a few years ago when they had the fires in California, I think the place was called Paradise Valley, Paradise something. They were saying that when you talk about the reptilians that don't, that stay underground, that these there was a community in Paradise, Paradise, California. Remember the
Mm-hmm.
things were
That's
burning
what I'm
and
talking about.
they said that they were have a sort of they looked human, but they had teeth. They had teeth that they had to wear crowns and things over. They had a special dentist that was there for them. They had special times for these people to go to the market and so forth. They had houses above ground, but when they would go into the house, they would go underground from these houses, and that the targets that they were the targets, if you will, of the what they call it, the dues. Yeah, they call them the dues, right? Direct DEWs. The dues were directed at them to get rid of them who lived underground. Went in like they were going into a regular house. They would take their
Dentures
whatever,
out.
yeah, dentures out and so forth, and be themselves, but they would go underground from what was looked like an above ground house they didn't
So
really live
anybody can look this up. They told us the cover story was that they was doing war games in California. And that was the reason why there was all of that bombs and shooting going on.
in.
That's
Hmm.
not the truth of what was going on. That's the story they told us because too many people heard it.
Okay.
So I think that was in 2020.
Somewhere, yeah, somewhere back around there. But but I was told there was this reptilian community that
Mm-hmm.
they had special privileges, but they were in the community for a long, long time, but they were the targets of this. And I see it here. Somebody said, yes, Paradise said I lived that event, Dr. G. It was horrific. Here's somebody's, so it was really. Here's another one. Oh no, not that one. That's crazy. I live in California, was in Paradise for a couple of weeks. Yeah, so it was things going on. I don't know whether they were an experiment of living, in with that they decided they didn't want any more of. You know what I mean? And the government or whoever the so-called powers that be were decided, like we'll get rid of them.
Yeah.
But
So
on the subject of reptilians, before you go anywhere else, what do you think about that so-called costume that Kim K had on that looks so realistic? Because a lot of folks talked about that. It was just too over the top. Real, like was is a is a costume what she's wearing most of the time, and she showed her real self. What do you say to that? I mean, maybe you don't.
you remember when Aaliyah played in the movie called The Queen of the Damned?
Yes, I remember that movie. I don't remember the
The,
movie seeing it, but I remember the movie.
the character she was playing was Kim Kardashian.
Oh, really? Hmm.
Kim Kardashian ain't regular.
Hmm. Okay.
And this made Aaliyah hot in the Hollywood circles because they didn't ever want that role to be taken by somebody that would know how to imitate her. What they call it her true form,
Okay.
right? And they say Aaliyah did the job too well. So Kim Kardashian came out on the at one of them award shows dressed like the Queen of the Damned because she now have to identify who Aaliyah was talking about in the public face to see who gonna catch it.
Hmm.
So if you look up Queen of the Damned slash Kim Kardashian, it'll come up side by side comparison.
Okay.
She's just showing you her true colors. She ain't no good. Salute to Kanye for diving on the bear. Somebody had to hold the bear till we could figure out how to kill that son bitch.
Well, he seems to be a very erratic. Who knows?
That's character role called Hayoka Chief War Dancing. The goal
Okay.
is to make regular people think that you totally erratic and insane. But in the course of that, you have to reveal great truths. And he did it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of revealing truths, I mean, Kat said that this was going to be 2024, which is almost over. It's going to be the year of disclosure. I was clipping through something the other day and saw um, I want to say it may have been a TikTok or Instagram with Nicki Minaj, Mrs. Petty, as she must be called, and Ray J, for instance. And she like totally decimated him in the sense that he was kowtowing to her, and she told him not to call her Nikki. She told him she was Mrs. Petty, and then she started asking him or saying to him, asking him certain things to pull out whether or not he was double dipping, back and who he was and why was he trying to. He said he wanted to be a part of her. I guess her. Does she have a label or something? He wanted to go, and she totally, totally in public made him look like. And I'm thinking, why is he sniveling like that? Because what's happening, with this system? I mean, like I said, there's so many things, like I said, that came out to distract us. He was one of them. Diddy's been a big part of it. All the people that are coming out to distract us, but I think the main question is, what are we being distracted from?
Some of
What
that
will,
some of that is not distraction.
okay.
Some of it is not distraction. But because we love gossip so much, all that stuff is coded still to get the gossipers to spread the rumor.
Hmm.
And they still telling the code, but they don't know it. Puffy ain't
Yeah.
the target.
Who is the target?
All of them pedophile executives Clive Davis, Larry Cohane. There's a whole bunch of them. They all Clive financed Diddy parties, and ain't nobody talking about that. Everybody know that Clive used to give him the money for the parties
Right.
because he was the director. He was telling Diddy everything that needed to be done. He ain't getting away.
Mm-hmm.
What he did to Phyllis Hyman, for what he did to Whitney Houston, Angela Bofield, and I could keep going, but he ain't
Yeah.
getting away. He think because he old and shriveled up, they ain't gonna figure out a way to give his ass the guillotine. He got another thing coming. Same with Larry Cohane, Ted Fields, what's the Tommy Mottola?
Mm-hmm.
They ain't getting away. But somebody had to be as depraved as them in order to get them to let their guard down enough to drag them out.
Well, like trying to say that, and I'm gonna get off the Diddy thing, but they were saying, Clive Davis, and they then even said Andre Harrell, I guess his name, was responsible for grooming Diddy.
Creating,
But when you look back at his history and see that he went to a Catholic, all boys Catholic school where the priests were known pedophiles and was exposed, the likelihood is that I called him, he was an altar boy, and I said what he was actually an altered boy, and it happened at that level, and so he was just right for whatever was there in the entertainment field because he had already had his grooming done through his formative years of going to the school.
in the Matrix, the I think it's Matrix Revolution. They had these people called the Mandalorians, and they was taking this cat to put on the guillotine, right? And Neo grabbed the cat before they can pull the lever on the guillotine, and he was telling them there got to be a point that you're not willing to go, right? Otherwise, you sell your soul at that point, right? It's got to be a line that you're not willing to cross. When you get a person that's willing to cross all of the lines, that's your crash dummy. You let him go crash out because he's
Right.
gonna crash out anyway. But let him crash out with a purpose, right? They use every piece on the board for what it's useful for, and we all pieces on the board that's being played in real time. And so
Right.
we don't see what they doing. So you needed a buck dancing cracker like Trump because now we can get the opportunity to serve up the political distraction while we doing everything we supposed to do to reclaim the land. They worrying about who gonna win the presidency. I'm trying to kill the office.
You don't know. Well, they say he's the last the last trumpet, the last president, all that stuff. So perhaps, and a couple people are saying something, and I agree with this. How let me see, yeah, said that Quincy died unscathed, darn shame, but it's starting to come out now because they're starting to bring up stuff about, well, Tevin Campbell is probably the biggest one that hits as far as
That's the
being
main one.
blatant.
I was mad at Quincy about what he did to Tevin.
Tevin, yeah. But you got to think in terms. Did he do anything to Mike? Did he do anything to Will? Because they're all tied to him, and who else?
Yeah.
Who knows that?
Well, Mike is a unique situation. Um, he always had people around him. So if somebody did something, it was a whole clique of people in on it. Wasn't no one person. Quincy wasn't just gonna slide up on Mike and start molesting him. That wasn't gonna happen. But if he had a team of molesters around him that worked together, now that's possible. Because there was always been a team around Mike since he was little.
Hmm.
So if he got molested, the whole team was in on it.
Now in the book, thanks for the memories, which is a PDF out there. I can't think of that lady's name, but thanks for the memories book. I distinctly remember when I read that book, the woman who was part of it, was the victim of MK. she said that she remembered being taken to the opening of when they first appeared, I think on the Ed Sullivan show. I believe it was the
Mm-hmm.
Ed Sullivan show. That those she said they were all I think she either she says molested or she might say sodomized backstage. That she says it in the book because she lists some other folks that she says were MK Ultra, but she called the book Thanks for the Memories because one of the people she was handed off to, and according to her account, and I'm just saying this is for educational purpose only, but she says was Bob Hope, and that's how she ended up at the at the Ed Sullivan show when they were there. She was backstage, and she said they were all sodomized before they went out on the stage, and she lists some other things that happened with other people. But this stuff that we're hearing about is so old, and when I say old, it's been going on ever since they created their Hollywood and their industries. That seems like that was part of the base plan of those industries was to incorporate that kind of abuse in order to get control. Because once you
Well,
get that, I heard it said you get to the root chakra. That's where she was saying that Diddy was drawing his power from this backdoor situation she would do with these, fear, pain, and whatever, and the root chakra. That's why they were doing all
yeah,
those,
That's Babylonian sex magic.
okay, I don't know what it's called, but that's what they're
It's
doing.
Babylonian sex magic, and it's straight out of the Mishnah and the Talmud.
It's in there,
Yeah,
Lord.
it's even concealed in the Old Testament.
Mm,
Right, but it's Babylonian sex magic, and the goal is if you have an heir to the throne as the prince, you're supposed to sodomize him to make him unfit to rule. That's in the Sumerian tablets. Once you
okay.
sodomize, you unfit to rule. Right, and they not only do that, they also do it to control the victim. Right, they're creating some kind of artificial link with the victim where they can't break out of that psychological trauma. It's the worst trauma bind you can possibly do to a person.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's what they've been doing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, their time is up. The gig is up because they wasn't gonna keep doing this stuff in secret, and ain't nobody gonna figure it out. Because you got energy signatures that saying, "Wait a minute, if what I'm seeing is right, that would mean this is taking place in the dark." Right. So when you're looking at the decay of society, that's entropy. That means it's coming to its close. So as the society starts to break down, it breaks down in a predictable pattern based on historical records. And these is all designed to function within a cycle called an age or an eon,
Hmm.
right? When people be talking about the end of the world ain't going nowhere. Your ass might, but the world ain't going nowhere,
Right.
right? So it's not the end of the world, it's the end of a type of civilization that's no longer functional for the greater benefit of the people. So now you have a lot of teachers emerging from silence that wouldn't have never been speaking before, using alternative outlets to deliver information, right? And these alternative outlets serve for also public notice according to the court standard. Timestamp dated in an archivable format. Notice the agent is notice the principal. Once it's on the record, they can't delete it. They can try everything they can to cover it up, but once the people know, the people know. The gig
Right.
is up, right? But now we at the part where something got to trigger the great disclosure.